On mine, so just don't even worry about it. I think it's just the same as mine.
We have the same company.
Yeah. Alright, how do you get the timer to like go above the window?
You move it up there.
Alright, so this is the 2NR that I didn't win.
Oh, was this the one against
Yeah. Oh, it was so close. Alright. Everybody ready?
This debate is going to come down to an impossible perm that doesn't solve for realism. Even if they win that the perm can't solve for realism, they can see that the way they depict the reality is inaccurate. This means that there's no net benefit to the permutation, so even if there's a risk of a residual link permutation, you vote negative. On the link debate, we have two conceded links that are going to devastate perm solvency. First is the hegemony link, that's later 7. Later isolates how the representations of a need for hegemony, a need for power, justifies violence in the face of losing that power. Not only does this function as a link, but also as a case turn. Later talks about how when we search for power, ultimately we lose that power. It also isolates an external impact of minority oppression. Even if you give the permutation solvency, the pursuit of hegemony will just oppress minorities, making the alternative alone preferable. That's an external impact that makes you prefer the alternative over the permutation. Second is the North Korean link. That's the Smith 2K evidence. The 1AR does a fabulous job answering this link, but it should have been in the 2EC. The link card was right in the 1NC, and they should have answered it. To attack the 2NR, it's the hardest speech in debate. The Smith card isolates how the way we view North Korea as a violent, irrational child takes part in a securitizing discourse. In addition, Smith discusses how we actually cause North Korea's aggressive behavior by isolating them that way. North Korea feels that they are mocked and feared, and that the only way that they can get influence or somehow pose against the threatening U.S. is to pursue nuclear weapons, turning the case. These conceded links and move page. These conceded links and case arguments are going to be disassessed to the permutation in addition to the external impacts of oppressing minorities on the hegemony flow. Go to the framework debate. Will concede their policy-making framework. The judge can only evaluate the actual policy and policy implications. However, they concede the second argument made by our Hansen assist card. The representations shape the central policy. This means that even in a policy-making framework, the representations have a causal link, and it forces the judge to evaluate our critique because we've won. The representations are actually policy issues, so you still have to evaluate our impacts and our case for arguments. Even if you ignore our alternatives, you can just view the critique as a linear descent to the case turn plus the alternative. Since it's based in representations, that's also a policy issue because they've conceded their representation shape policies. Go to the alternative debate. They say our alternative fails, but extended costs are bleaker or one evidence that the alternative just needs to forget the realist discourse, and then we can overcome it. Also, Alexander Black or Nunca that works great with this. It talks about how we're able to forget poor international relations. We solve for the dilemma it causes and the impacts that it actually leads to, and allows us to understand the future in a different way, such that we don't replicate the problems that we have now. Two key reasons that the alternative doesn't matter in the first place. First is that if the alternative fails, the permutation fails. The permutation is based off of alternative solvency and being able to forget realism while still doing the plan, which means that if we can't actually forget realism to solve, then the permutation doesn't solve, and it's just a linear descent to a plan, and there's nothing they can hold against it. Second is that we don't even need to win our alternative. You can evaluate the critique as a dissent to the case. The status quo is always preferable to a policy that entrenches the problems isolated by the one EC. So if we win our link arguments, we win the dissent. We win the case uniquely causes realism, increases realism. And they say the realism is inevitable. That's a stupid argument. Extended across our Craig 2 evidence. That's another link card. It just it also isolates how telling the judge why it's inevitable justifies bond. It talks about how if we just say that realism is inevitable, we'll allow them to say, oh, it's okay that we're realists, it's okay that we're viewing the world in the wrong way because it's inevitable and there's nothing we can do about it, and justifies violence because that violence is just inevitable and there's nothing we can do about it. And if we really, if we get past that idea that things are just inevitable, then we can actually solve for that violence. Let's go to the impact debate. Do not let them tell you in the 2AR that the case is a dissent to the alternative. They have conceded throughout the debate the implications of our George 94 evidence from the 1NC. It's really sweet, call it after the round. First is that the actual cause of the impacts is realist discourse, which means that the alternative alone would solve for all of it, which means if they say the dissent to the alternative, that's not true because the alternative solves the root cause of the actual of the impacts isolated in the 1AC. Second is that the scenarios isolated by the affirmative don't actually exist and are not objective depictions of reality, which means that there is no net benefit to permutation other than some contrived scenarios that aren't objectively accurate. George 94 therefore it also isolates an external extinction impact that does not benefit the alternative over the permutation because we won our links and we won our this impact is unconsidered. That's an extinction impact that's going to make the alternative that's a disadd to the permutation in addition to the oppression impacts isolated by the hegemony links. Let's go to the permutation debate. First, extend our Darian and Shapiro 89 card that accepting the tenets of realism makes critique impossible. We want two conceded links, which means that they definitely accept tenets of realism. This card isolates how we get trapped within realism and we can't or are unable to question it. People who believe in certain tenets of realism believe that realism is reality, and you cannot question reality. The way realism is structured is as a cage that traps us and doesn't allow us to question it. They make this war representations argument, but this is a stupid argument. It just talks about how if the world is realist, that if realism is true, then we should act in a realist manner. And if we win that realism is the bad way to view the world, then we won that the logic behind this argument is untrue. Not only is this argument based in realism, and so if one realism is bad, it's untrue. It also uses circular logic. If the world is realist, we should be realist, proving that the world is realist. And it's the most retarded argument ever. Thus, our external extinction effect and our oppression argument outweighs and benefit of the permutation, even if they win that war representations are good. We win that the impacts to their securitizing representations are considerably larger. The war representation argument is only isolates that if there is war, then we should prepare for war. But if there's no war in a world without realism, which our evidence isolates will happen, then there's no actual net benefit. There's no impact to this argument, which means that the permutation. Which means there's no net benefit to the permutation. Even if at this point I can see that the permutation solves the entirety of realism, they still pursue hegemony, which means they still oppress minorities, which makes the alternative inherently preferable to this, and you just vote negative on the fact that the permutation has zero net benefit and probably doesn't solve the case, or the alternative.